Welcome to DCF Investigations. Somewhere in the collective memory of America, there exists a dividing line. On one side lies the innocence of the post-war era, a time of unlocked doors, neighborhood trust, and the vibrant explosion of rock and roll. On the other side lies a darker reality, a realization that evil does not discriminate by age or location, and that the monsters we fear are often indistinguishable from the neighbors we greet. Tonight, we're traveling back to the freezing winter of 1956 in Chicago, Illinois. We're examining a case that shattered the illusion of safety for an entire generation. This is the story of Barbara and Patricia Grimes, two sisters who went to the movies to see their idol, Elvis Presley, and walked out into a mystery that remains one of the most haunting and controversial cold cases in criminal history. To understand the gravity of this disappearance, we must first immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of Brighton Park, Chicago, in 1956. It was a time of booming industry and tight-knit communities. Families lived in the same neighborhoods for generations. The grim realities of the Second World War were fading into the rearview mirror, replaced by a booming economy and the rise of teenage culture. It was a world where a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old could walk to the cinema alone without a second thought from their parents. The Grimes family fit perfectly into this tableau. Their mother, Loretta Grimes, was the embodiment of resilience. A hard-working clerk who raised her children with a firm but loving hand. She had faced the trials of divorce and was the sole provider for her large family. They lived in a modest home on South Damen Avenue. Among her children were Barbara, aged 15, and Patricia, aged 13. They were inseparable, yet distinct in their personalities. Barbara was the serious one, a conscientious student at Thomas Kelly High School, known for her maturity and her quiet ambition. Patricia was the firecracker, a seventh grader at St. Maurice Catholic School, described by everyone who knew her as bubbly, energetic, and full of life. Despite their differences, they shared a singular, all-consuming obsession that defined teenage girls of that year. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, had exploded onto the scene, bringing with him a cultural revolution. In December of 1956, his movie Love Me Tender was playing in theaters, and for Barbara and Patricia, seeing this film was not just a pastime, it was a pilgrimage. They had already seen it multiple times, but the allure of Elvis on the big screen was magnetic. On the afternoon of December 28, 1956, the winter air in Chicago was biting. Temperatures hovered near freezing, but the cold did nothing to dampen the sisters' excitement. They begged their mother for permission to go to the Brighton Theater to see the evening showing of Love Me Tender. Loretta Grimes, exhausted from work but doting on her daughters, agreed. It was a Friday night, the beginning of the weekend, and the theater was only a short bus ride or a mile-and-a-half walk away. The timeline of this evening is etched into the annals of Chicago history, reconstructed minute by minute by decades of investigators. At approximately 7:30 p.m., the girls left their home. They were dressed for the cold, but perhaps more focused on style than warmth. Barbara wore a beige wool coat, while Patricia donned a light gray jacket. They had $2.50 between them, enough for tickets and popcorn. They promised their mother they would be home before midnight. As they walked out the door, Loretta watched them go, never imagining that the image of her two daughters stepping into the winter night would be the last memory she would ever have of them alive. They arrived at the Brighton Theatre on Archer Avenue. The theater was packed, buzzing with the energy of hundreds of teenagers. We know for a fact they made it inside. A friend of theirs, Dorothy Weinert, sat behind them during the screening. She later reported to police that the sisters were in high spirits, laughing and swooning over Elvis. At the concession stand, they were seen buying popcorn. The atmosphere was safe, enclosed, and joyous. The first screening ended, but the girls decided to stay for the second showing. This was common practice at the time. A single ticket often allowed patrons to stay for a double feature. This decision, seemingly innocuous, pushed their departure time late into the night. The second movie ended around 11 p.m. The crowd spilled out onto Archer Avenue. The joyous noise of the theater faded into the stark silence of the winter night. Dorothy Weinert saw the sisters one last time near the popcorn counter as the movie let out. She was leaving with her own mother. Dorothy offered the Grimes sisters a ride home, but they politely declined. They explained that they were going to head to the bus stop. It was a fatal decision, though one made with the independence typical of teenagers. Witness accounts place Barbara and Patricia walking east on Archer Avenue. They were reportedly seen waiting at the bus stop. It is here that the timeline begins to fracture. The last confirmed sighting of the girls alive was just after 11 p.m. They were standing under the streetlights, their breath visible in the freezing air, waiting for the bus that would take them back to the safety of South Damen Avenue. They never boarded that bus. Back at home, the clock ticked past midnight. Loretta Grimes sat in her living room, her eyes fixed on the door. The girls were responsible. They were never late. As 12:30 approached, worry turned to panic. Loretta began making calls. She called the friends the girls might have stopped to see. She called the bus depot to see if there had been a breakdown. She called the police. In 1956, the police response to missing teenagers was vastly different from what it is today. The concept of immediate danger was often overshadowed by the assumption of teenage rebellion. The officer on the line suggested to Loretta that perhaps the girls had met some boys, or perhaps they had decided to run away to Nashville to see Elvis. This runaway theory would plague the investigation for weeks, wasting precious time and resources. Loretta was adamant. Her girls had left with only enough money for the movie. They had left behind their new Christmas presents, including a portable radio they adored. They were not runaways. Despite the police skepticism, Loretta's sheer force of will mobilized a search. By the next morning, the disappearance of the Grimes sisters began to ripple through Chicago. The initial search was a grassroots effort. Neighbors, school friends, and family members combed the streets of Brighton Park. They checked alleys, parks, and storefronts. But as the hours turned into days, the reality set in that Barbara and Patricia were not simply staying out late. The media frenzy that followed was unprecedented. The story of two young, innocent sisters vanishing after an Elvis movie captured the public imagination and horror. It reached such a fever pitch that Elvis Presley himself was contacted. In a move that demonstrated the severity of the situation, the king of rock and roll went on the radio. His voice, usually singing of heartbreak and romance, was somber as he pleaded with the girls. If you are good Elvis Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries. But the radio waves drifted into the ether, unanswered. Weeks dragged on. The Chicago Police Department, finally realizing this was not a runaway case, launched one of the largest manhunts in the city's history. Over 300,000 flyers were distributed. Canals were dragged. While the city searched, the winter tightened its grip. Snow fell, covering the city in a blanket of white, hiding whatever secrets lay beneath. Then came January 22nd, 1957. The weather had warmed slightly, causing a winter thaw. A construction worker named Leonard Prescott was driving along German Church Road in Willow Springs, a desolate wooded area far removed from the urban bustle of Brighton Park. As he drove, he glanced out the window toward a guardrail. Something caught his eye. It looked, at first glance, like discarded mannequins, pale against the wet earth. Prescott stopped his car and approached. The horror of what he found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Lying behind the guardrail, on a steep embankment leading down to a creek, were the naked bodies of Barbara and Patricia Grimes. The discovery sent a shockwave through Chicago that is difficult to describe. The hope that they were alive, perhaps just foolishly chasing a dream in Nashville, evaporated instantly. The scene was chaotic. Police swarmed the area. In the 1950s, crime scene preservation was not the rigorous science it is today. The area was trampled by officers, reporters, and onlookers. Crucial evidence may have been destroyed in the first hour of the discovery. The condition of the bodies immediately raised disturbing questions. They were lying in awkward positions. Barbara was on her left side, her legs slightly drawn up. Patricia lay on top of her sister's back, her head turned in the opposite direction. They were completely nude. Their clothes were nowhere to be found at the scene. The autopsy and the subsequent forensic investigation would become the epicenter of a massive controversy that muddies the waters of this case to this day. The bodies were taken to the Cook County morgue. Because of the freezing temperatures in the weeks prior, the bodies had been frozen and then thawed, which complicated the determination of the time of death and the cause of death. The official pathology report stated that the girls had died within 5 hours of leaving home on December 28th. This conclusion was based on the analysis of their stomach contents. The autopsy found the remnants of the popcorn they had eaten at the theater. In the logic of the time, this meant they died shortly after eating. The official cause of death was listed as secondary shock due to exposure to cold. Essentially, the coroner's office was suggesting the girls had been stripped and left to freeze to death. However, this official narrative was vehemently challenged by Harry Gloss, the chief investigator for the coroner's office. Gloss was a seasoned, cynical investigator who refused to toe the party line. He leaked details to the press that contradicted the official report. Gloss claimed that the autopsy revealed evidence of sexual assault, specifically in Barbara. He argued that the girls had been held captive for days, perhaps weeks, before being killed. Gloss pointed to the condition of the bodies as evidence. He noted that despite the weeks that had passed, the bodies were remarkably well preserved, suggesting they might have been kept in a cold place or that they hadn't died on the 28th. He also pointed to strange puncture marks on the girls' chests, which he believed were inflicted by an ice pick. The official report dismissed these as marks from animals or post-mortem damage, but Gloss was adamant. The conflict between Gloss and the official coroner's office became a public spectacle. Gloss was eventually fired for his refusal to stay silent, but his theories planted a seed of doubt that has never been uprooted. Was the official report a cover-up to avoid admitting that a sexual predator had held 2 girls captive in the city for weeks without detection? Or was Gloss a sensationalist looking for headlines? The investigation into who killed the Grimes sisters produced a rogues gallery of suspects, each more unsettling than the last. In the immediate aftermath, the police were under immense pressure to solve the case. This pressure led to the interrogation of Edward Benny Bedwell. Bedwell was a 21-year-old drifter, a dishwasher at a local restaurant who fit the profile of a convenient scapegoat. He was illiterate, poor, and easily manipulated. Under intense interrogation, which allegedly included beatings and psychological coercion, Bedwell confessed. He claimed he and a companion had picked the girls up, fed them hot dogs, and then, after the girls rebuffed their sexual advances, stripped them and left them in the cold. The police announced they had solved the case. But the confession fell apart almost immediately. The autopsy showed no hot dogs in the girls' stomachs, only the movie theater popcorn. Furthermore, Bedwell's description of the crime scene did not match the reality. The grand jury refused to indict him, realizing the confession was false. Bedwell was released, his life ruined, but he was not the killer. Another suspect emerged in the form of Max Fleig. Fleig was a 17-year-old who voluntarily took a polygraph test. During the test, he allegedly confessed to kidnapping the girls and killing them. However, in a twist of legal frustration, the Illinois state law at the time prohibited the use of polygraph results as evidence in court, and it also prevented the police from booking a suspect solely based on a polygraph confession. Without physical evidence linking Fleig to the crime, he was released. He was later committed to a mental institution for an unrelated crime, leaving investigators to wonder if a killer had slipped through their fingers due to a technicality. Then there was the shadow of organized crime. Silas Jane was a notorious figure in the Chicago underworld, involved in the horse racing business and known for his brutality. His property was not far from where the bodies were found. Years later, whispers emerged that the girls might have attended a party at a horse stable, a party that went wrong. This theory aligns with the idea that they were held captive. The Jane connection links this case to the later murder of the Schuessler-Peterson boys, another horrific crime involving children in Chicago. Though no definitive physical evidence ever connected Jane to the Grimes sisters, one of the most chilling suspects was Charles Melquist. Melquist was convicted of the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott in 1958, a case with striking similarities. Bonnie's body was found decapitated, but the location and the method of abduction bore a resemblance to the Grimes case. Melquist was a predator operating in the same area. He was questioned about the Grimes sisters, but never charged. As the years turned into decades, the case went cold, but the torment for Loretta Grimes did not end. For years after the murder, she received anonymous phone calls. A voice would mock her, detailing how the girls died, claiming to be the killer. The police traced some calls, but the caller was elusive, a phantom voice adding psychological torture to a grieving mother's burden. Loretta died in 1989, never knowing who took her daughters. So, where does the case stand today? The murder of the Grimes sisters remains officially unsolved. However, modern sleuths and retired detectives continue to pick at the scabs of this mystery. One prevailing modern theory, championed by researcher Ray Johnson, suggests that the girls may have been lured into a car by someone they knew or someone posing as an authority figure. Johnson uncovered that a neighbor of the girls had been offering rides to teenagers. Furthermore, we must reconsider the forensic evidence through a modern lens. The discrepancy in the stomach contents is critical. If the girls truly died within 5 hours of the movie, where were their clothes? Why were they found weeks later? If they were held captive, how did the killer suppress them without leaving more obvious signs of restraint? The ice pick marks mentioned by Harry Gloss remain a point of contention. Were they truly wounds, or were they artifacts of the freezing and thawing process? There is also the matter of the secondary crime scene. It is almost certain that the girls were not killed where they were found. The lack of blood, the positioning of the bodies, and the absence of clothing suggest they were transported to German Church Road after death. This implies a killer with a vehicle, physical strength, and knowledge of the remote areas outside the city. In recent years, there has been a push to exhume the bodies for DNA testing. Modern technology could potentially retrieve DNA from the remains that was impossible to detect in 1957. However, legal hurdles and the degradation of evidence over nearly 70 years make this a difficult prospect. The legacy of the Grimes sisters' murder is woven into the fabric of Chicago. It marked the end of an era of innocence. Parents who once let their children roam free began to lock their doors and wait anxiously by the window. The image of Barbara and Patricia, frozen in time as the smiling girls who just wanted to see Elvis, stands as a grim reminder of the vulnerability of youth. As we look back on this case, we are left with a puzzle with missing pieces. We have the timeline of the movie theater. We have the sighting at the bus stop. And then we have the void, the empty space of time where 2 lives were extinguished. Was it a crime of opportunity by a passing predator? Was it a local acquaintance who offered a ride that turned into a nightmare? Or was it something darker, a trap laid by someone who knew exactly how to lure 2 star-struck teenagers? The files gathered dust in the archives of the Cook County Sheriff's Office. The snow still falls on German Church Road every winter, covering the embankment where they were found. The screams of that night, if there were screams, were swallowed by the wind long ago. But the questions remain. This is DCF Investigations. We keep these stories alive because the truth, no matter how old, deserves to be found. We honor Barbara and Patricia by refusing to let them be just another cold case statistic. Now, I turn this over to you. Considering the conflicting autopsy reports and the botched police work of the 1950s, do you believe the girls were killed the night they disappeared? Or do you believe Harry Gloss's theory that they were held captive? And if they were held, where could 2 teenage girls be hidden in a bustling city without anyone noticing? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and until next time, keep searching for the light in the shadows.